Here's a friendly tip for you. It's a Jake Query life tip. There are not many of these that I can provide to anybody. I mean, after all, I'm a 53-year-old unmarried guy that lives by myself with a cat, right? So who am I to be able to provide any sort of life advice? Although, maybe some would say that that's the brilliant way of doing it.
Jake,
right?
we have a lot of sounders on this show. So, we've got the breaking news sounder. We've got your bad analogy sounder.
Can we do a recap real quick?
Okay.
The breaking news sounder sounds like the following, right? Okay. And we do have some of that for today, by the way. We'll get to that. Now, what other sounders do we have?
You got your bad analogy.
Let's hear that. Okay. This is that fella from Fish that's playing a vacuum cleaner. I do have a bad analogy to come up with today as well. It won't be long before that happens. What else do we have?
Brain drop.
Okay. I've had a couple of those. 3:48 in the morning. I had one last night, as a matter of fact.
We haven't rolled this one out in a long time, Jake, so I have to dust it off.
Oh, yes. That's our friend Robin the Genie, right?
That is. We haven't had a visit from Robin. I wonder if we'll get one with the holiday season
He's
upon
probably
us.
paying off his debts of all the people that he owes $1 million, right?
Yes. And then whenever you renew the subscription for the Elixir, we've got that.
Okay. The Elixir, of course, interprets what athletes say, right? What
Yes.
they really mean. Okay.
And then we've got the good old
Oh, yeah.
conspiracy
That's
theory.
the Jimmy Cook conspiracy theory, right?
The tinfoil hat.
Tinfoil hat, yeah.
Then we
Well-
have some miscellaneous ones like this one.
Oh. Prepare to qualify. Yes. Okay. Let's begin with the breaking news sounder if we could. It's not necessarily breaking today, but I anticipate that at some point today we'll have an update on it. Daniel Jones is on the Colts injury report. This is not new news, I realize, but it was as of late yesterday with an apparent calf injury. Now, we don't know the severity of the calf injury.
We do not.
And I thought Kevin Bowen made an excellent point about this, who's going to join us on the show today at 2 o'clock. And when Kevin does, I think we'll have a little more perspective, a little more clarity on all of this. But one of the things that is, I'm a big guy on precedent. You can learn a lot about things by looking at the precedent of them and then saying, okay, so what did we learn from the past that we can apply to the present? And when it comes to the Colts and the NFL in general, a little background for people that may not be aware. I think most people have a peripheral passerby understanding of this, but maybe never stopped to think, okay, the clarity of it. The NFL has always done, I shouldn't say always, but it's been, the injury reports that are released by teams is one of those things that for a long time, you just kind of took it with a grain of salt. And there wasn't a lot of devout, diehard, pay attention to it, need to know interest about the injury reports. But in my opinion, now I'm not stating that as fact, but it is my observation and opinion, which more often than not is actually fact. But it is my observation and opinion that when the NFL started partnering with sports gambling apps, and they have business relationships thereof, and that's fine. I got nothing against that. I mean, I get the world that we live in, the culture that we live in, the era that we live in. And I don't even know at this point which one it is that's like the official partner of it. The running joke and the running gag, of course, being 2 more athletes have been investigated for a gambling scandal. We'd like to tell you more about that here on the FanDuel Network after we take this moment to bring you this special message from DraftKings. And we do all of that during the Bet Rivers break. You know what I mean? I mean, I get it. And I don't know which one it is. I can't recall that is directly linked to the NFL. But it is such big business. It is such big advertising revenue, all of that, that the NFL wants to make sure that if you are wagering on its contests, if you are putting money and financially investing in games, that you have the utmost integrity, or the league does, in making sure that they are presenting to you on the surface a fair matchup for you to wager on. Because now people have financial investment in these things, and so therefore the league has basically said to teams, you've got to start taking these injury reports far more seriously, and you have to be far more transparent about it. We have seen teams in the past that have gotten in trouble for not being completely transparent on their injury report, or like Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, if I'm not mistaken, there was a situation where people were like, wait a minute, they said this and then this happened, and, so every little thing as a result of that, now there is an element of, with injuries, when they first show up on the injury report, you don't know the severity of it because there is a little bit of CYA that takes place with teams where they put down a little bit of everything if a guy's going to miss practice time or whatever else. However, and with the Colts, we have seen in the past, a guy's on the injury report on a Thursday and then practices on Friday, plays on Sunday, and you kind of never hear about it again. There's also times where a guy goes on the injury report on a Thursday with an injury that you're like, well, that's new. And then, boom, he goes on IR. And you're like, whoa, we went from 0 to 60 quickly here. We don't know which that is with Daniel Jones. And, of course, you're coming off of a bye, which makes it that much more peculiar as to what or where this might have popped up. It is a critically important piece because if he is not able to go, and I want to make very clear here, as of this 8 minutes after 12 o'clock or 6 minutes after whatever we are, on Friday, we have no reason to know or think or speculate that he's not going to go on Sunday. But if he's not, what we know is this: Anthony Richardson is still not available. Riley Leonard likely becomes, your starter. And then you bring Rippon up off of the practice squad who you'd signed, and he gets elevated, and he becomes basically your backup. And that's where things stand right now. But this game in particular, I really do think, I did this morning a radio show in Kansas City, and one of the things at the end of the interview, they said, okay, and it's funny because I asked this question. It's Sports Talk Radio 101, I guess, because they said, okay, Jake, bottom line, if the Colts are to win this game, it's going to be because they did what? And, of course, your natural answer is score more points. But I think for both teams, for the Colts and Chiefs, for both teams, the answer is simple, and that is how much can they get to and disrupt the quarterback? And for the Colts, that's a bigger task because, number one, this is not a team this year that has made life miserable for quarterbacks on the regular in terms of getting to and disrupting. And number two, Patrick Mahomes almost seems – let me give you a bad analogy, okay? So, Eddie, go ahead with sounder number 2 if you could. Here is a bad analogy when it comes to Patrick Mahomes. Maybe this isn't even an analogy. It's more a comparison, which makes it a really bad analogy. But when Ron Artest first came to the Pacers, and the Bulls had basically said to Indiana, hey, this is a wonderful guy and a tremendous player, and the Pacers were really trying to get Brad Miller. And they traded Travis Best and Jalen Rose to Chicago for Brad Miller, Ron Artest, Ron Mercer, and Kevin Ollie. And Artest, of course, turned out to be the gem. I mean, a tremendous player, a tremendous person, all of it. He was the gem of that trade. But when that happened, the Pacers basically sat down with Ron Artest and went through and provided resources to navigate through some of the challenges that Ron Artest was having. And Ron Artest has been he's been very public about this. When he won a title with the Lakers, he said, I want to thank the Pacers. I want to thank my therapist. That therapist eventually basically reported that for Ron Artest had grown up in a house, not with violence, not with indiscretion, but where there were people in and out a lot, and there was a lot going on, and as a result of that, psychologically, he was most comfortable in chaos. And so when things started to go well and the Pacers were humming along and everything was going great, Ron Artest would almost, not knowingly, not intentionally, but subconsciously, he would create chaos because that's what he was most comfortable with. And that's where he would thrive, was in situations that were chaotic. Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback is like that in terms of his playing style. And what I mean by that is he almost as a quarterback is most comfortable when there's chaos totally going on around him. He is not your classic drop back Joe Montana pocket presence quarterback. He is a guy, as Patrick Mahomes when, and that's what makes him so dangerous. And that's what makes the Chiefs so unlikable, truthfully, is during their runs, how many times have you seen games and or plays and or drives where the Chiefs, you had them dead to rights, and then boom, he rises up and makes a play, and you're like, oh my gosh. I thought for sure it was a 4th and 17, and he's scrambling for his life, and you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to get them off the field, and Buffalo's going to the Super Bowl. We're going to get them off the field, and the Colts are going to win this game, whatever it might be. Bad example because he's never beaten the Colts in the regular season, I realize, but you get what I'm saying. And then he makes a play. But getting to and then completing disruption and chaos on Patrick Mahomes is going to be important for the Colts. And what you have to hope now is that they are able to get coverage disruption. Because if you get Shavarius Mooney-Ward back and you have Sauce Gardner, if Gardner is, and I realize it's only game number 2, but you have good safety play, if you're able to close off the back end defensively, then you've got to, on the front end, on your front 4, then you've got to take advantage of that with that extra time and complete and finish the play and not let Mahomes do Mahomes things. That's, for the Colts defensively, the key. And then offensively, it is obvious, Eddie, that for the Colts, what they have to do is protect Daniel Jones and not get him, not only because of the calf now. Let's take that aside. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that the calf was he had a leg cramp. Okay, I don't know that. I mean, it could be a strain, whatever. But let's say that it's minimal and he plays. Having nothing to do with the calf injury, you've got to protect Daniel Jones, just because what we've seen now for the last 2 games is, in fact, that when Pittsburgh started blitzing and then Atlanta just took that blueprint, it makes Daniel Jones uncomfortable. And that's where you start getting into problems where the ugly past of the New York Giants turnovers started to come into play. And you got to nip that in the bud.
Yeah, I think the biggest key for the Colts, Jake, is something they haven't typically done a lot this season, and that's coming out and running the football early. They like to use the pass in the first half and then let Jonathan Taylor wear you down in the second half, and that's when he puts up most of his rushing production. However, I think when you're going up against a Kansas City defense, you need to be able to establish that run early to try to open things up for Daniel Jones in the play-action game to kind of offset the blitzes that Steve Spagnuolo is going to bring, because Jesse Newell said it yesterday, to this point in the year, the blitzing numbers for Spagnuolo have been down in comparison to relatively some of their best years defensively, and you've seen what Pittsburgh and Atlanta did. They just started bringing 6 guys, 7 guys, and it forces a lot of one-on-one blocking. And not the Pacers, but the Colts are getting beat on the edge between T.J. Watt, Alex Highsmith, and the 2 rookies for the Falcons. And now you have to be able to offset that, whether that's with the draw game and the run game, whether that's RPOs with Daniel Jones, if you can move him around the pocket a little bit, or use Jonathan Taylor in some screen action, or you get some wide receiver screens going on. You got to find ways to neutralize the opposing pass rush to buy a little bit more time for Daniel Jones in the pocket.
The Colts are getting beat on the edge, and the Pacers are getting beat everywhere else. That's what you meant to say, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
By everyone else, right? You mentioned, by the way, defensive matchups against the quarterback, and you came up with these numbers, Eddie. Lou Anarumo defenses against Patrick Mahomes, okay?
Yep.
Patrick Mahomes going up against a defense where Lou Anarumo is designed and in charge of coming up with the plays that are necessary, okay? They have played 6 times. Patrick Mahomes has gone up against the defense from there 6 times. In those 6 games, 500 record, 3 wins for each. But Mahomes, 136 of 198. That's nearly 70%, 68.7%. 1,479 yards, 246 and a half a game. How you get that half yard is impressive.
Yeah, I know, right?
4 interceptions and 11 touchdowns. So it's not like this is a scheme that Patrick Mahomes is sitting up at night at 3:48 in the morning and getting brain droppings, right? He's not losing sleep over this per se.
It's not like the Bengals were beating the Chiefs in those, early matchups between the two teams by holding the offense to a low number offensively. The Bengals were putting up points in those 3 games that Kansas City lost to the Cincinnati Bengals. It was 34-31, 27-24, 27-24. When Kansas City won, it was 23-20, 25-17, 26-25. So there has been some inconsistencies with the production of Patrick Mahomes versus Lou Anarumo, because there are a couple of games in there, Jake, where he's got a low passing number in terms of yards, 151 in their last game, but he was able to get the ball into the touchdown twice. They were able to run the ball a little bit. That's what you have to prevent if you are Lou Anarumo on Sunday, because Kansas City's one of the worst teams at running the football this year. Like, they don't run it a lot, and I think that was the recipe that Denver showed, is that they're going to drop back and put 8 guys in coverage and be like, hey, we're going to force you to run the ball, and they still didn't run the ball.
Now, if you were to ask Colts fans, let's say that we're going to go to opening day in Grand Park in Westfield, okay? You got Colts fans from all over, not just people that are going to Lucas Oil Stadium on a Sunday, but Colts fans that have come in. It's the first night practice, whatever it might be, at Grand Park next year. And you stop randomly 1,000 Colts fans, and you ask those 1,000, tell me, and maybe it's 2 different answers, tell me your most hated rival as a Colts fan. Now, we know who number 1 is going to be. Of the 1,000 fans, 896 of them are going to say, Eddie, the answer is?
The New England Patriots.
Correct. And that's Pacers-Knicks. That's going to be the case forever, just based on the history there. Then after that, you would have a little bit of a smattering. Some would say the Tennessee Titans because of the early years of the AFC South. Some would say the Houston Texans because of recency bias of Houston being the most consistent team in the AFC South. And Houston last night with an impressive win, starting to all of a sudden, objects in mirror may be closer than they appear. Some would maybe say Jacksonville, but that's a real stretch because Jacksonville's kind of like the annoying little brother, right? Although in the early years, AFC South, again, John Henderson, you had some guys, they had some dudes for a while there. Outside of that, you wonder if Kansas City would get votes, because the reality is this is a franchise that has as much history against the Colts as most of them that are on the schedule, quite frankly. Because you look at, there have been great games historically between the Colts and Chiefs, but almost, and this is bizarre to say, because the Chiefs are a fantastic franchise. They are the gold standard of the AFC for the last decade, basically. And yet, they have always been for the – I would imagine people in Kansas City would say Indianapolis far more than Indianapolis would think of Kansas City. Now, I can tell you, being somebody who lived in that area, that for Chiefs fans, the Raiders, the Broncos, that division in general, back in the early 90s, I mean, the Raiders were a huge rival to the Chiefs. But that probably has waned significantly because the Raiders haven't done anything since then. But having said that, if you look historically at this, there have been some big-time matchups. 95 in the freezing cold, and Lynn Elliott missing kicks, and Bob Lamey. The Chiefs, the mighty Chiefs, have fallen to the Colts. The let-her-rip miracle run, and to go through Kansas City in sub-Arctic temperatures and go in there and stun that crowd. And then you come back in the Manning era and the no-punt game and the run to the Super Bowl where it was a fait accompli that Larry Johnson was going to run for 390 yards against him. The Colts completely bottled him up, and that's their first win, and they're on their way. Boom, they're off and running. I mean, there have been some really big matchups between these two teams. And then, of course, and a statistic that you're only going to hear 2,000 times between now and Sunday, it is the only franchise that Patrick Mahomes has never beaten in the regular season. And here's his chance to fight to once again slay the dragon. And I've got a feeling Again, it's all going to come down to how comfortable Daniel Jones is, whether or not the Colts get that win. I go back and forth on this. They haven't asked us yet, have they, Eddie, as for our score prediction, correct?
They have not.
Do you know which way you're leaning there?
I do.
Okay. Tell us later in the show.
Possibly.
Now, one more bad analogy here. I'm driving into work today. I'm going down Meridian Street. I'm at about, Meridian and Michigan, something like that, a little bit north of the circle. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, and I don't know if anybody's seen this guy before, okay? This seems like it should be something that's on your ways as a hazard, and it should alert you to it. This guy comes out right in front of me, basically just right in front of me, in a lay-down bike. Anybody seen this guy? I saw a guy on a unicycle yesterday. Today, I see a guy on a lay-down bike. You know what I'm talking about?
I've seen the guy on the unicycle.
The guy in the unicycle yesterday looked like Sigmund Freud. It was not the typical shirtless unicycle guy. Different unicycle guy. Might have been the same unicycle, but different guy. And then this guy today is in a lay-down bicycle, the kind that, that's the only way I can describe it, a lay-down bicycle.
Those are what they're called.
And he's literally...
Recumbent bikes.
What's that?
Recumbent bikes. That's
what it's called?
Yeah.
How about just reclining bikes? Who came up with recumbent? Why not just call it a reclining bike? So this guy breaks out right in front of me. Okay, it's 45 out. It's rainy. It's cold. So the windshield's like half fogged up, whatever. And this guy just out of nowhere. I'm just cruising along Meridian, minding my own business, clearing my head, no traffic, and here comes this guy in his reclining bike, his recumbent bike, his lay-down bike, whatever you want to call it. All I know is this: the thing's like 3 feet off the ground. There's no way this guy can see anything around him. He's got no peripheral vision. He pulls out right in front of me, and I'm thinking to myself, This guy is this obstacle that caused me to immediately over into the other lane and out oncoming traffic. It's a disaster. This guy, I don't know if this guy's like in Death Wish 2. I don't know what's going on, right? But all I know is I'm thinking to myself, this guy is basically like the logo at mid-court in that disastrous court in the Bahamas Purdue had to play on last night. Just when you're moving down the middle of the court, going down, things are unincumbent, if that's even a word, unimpeded. Something about the slippery nature of that floor caused guys to have to basically go around it almost because of it was a disaster. Somebody's going to get hurt, and I hope I'm wrong. I mean, I'm not wishing for this at all, but some player is going to get hurt on that court. Last night, Purdue. That was a great game for Purdue and Memphis. Indiana getting a win as well. We'll get into all of that over the course of the show today because I think there's something we could learn from both of those games last night for Indiana and Purdue. But when we come back, college football. Indiana's on a bye week, but and what they're doing is drumming up a lot of attention for their quarterback. And somebody from a national standpoint covering college athletics with NBC, Nicole Auerbach, going to join us next. Thing that I have noticed in the last 72 to 96 hours, and I think we kind of anticipated this. There is no doubt about the fact that Indiana athletically right now, their department is pushing all in on promoting Fernando Mendoza for the Heisman, as they should. As I'd mentioned, Indiana, of course, has never had a Heisman Trophy winner. Anthony Thompson should have won it in 1989. Andre Ware ended up taking it that year. And he had a fabulous year at Houston, don't get me wrong. But I still wake up in a cold sweat over the thought that Anthony Thompson should have won that. But nonetheless, I digress. But Indiana in a bye week, that's not to say there's not still plenty to talk about in college football from a local standpoint. Joining us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line, you see her work with NBC and Peacock. Nicole Auerbach joining the program to talk a little college football. Nicole, happy weekend. How are you?
I'm good. Cannot believe only 2 weeks left of the regular season. I know only one game left for you guys, but wild how fast this season has flown.
You know, I say this every year, Nicole, like in about when football first starts getting underway and everybody gets super excited for training camps and all that kind of stuff. And I always say, just be careful what you wish for, because then you snap your fingers and before you know it, it's 38 and raining outside, right? I mean, because the year goes that fast, the football season. Did you anticipate that at this point, with just one regular season left to go, like at what point did you realize that Indiana could still have themselves right here in the thick of this mix?
Well, I mean, the fact that they're undefeated, I think that after the Oregon game was when I was like, all right, like this is very much in front of them. And, you know, it's pretty remarkable. Coming into the year, I didn't think there would be a huge drop off from last year's team. But in my mind, that meant, okay, so maybe like a 9-win team, right? Maybe, we're not talking playoff. But, like, this is a new level of expectation, and the floor is so much higher for Indiana football. So certainly did not, like, coming into the year, expect that we would be talking about, an 11-0 team that's number 2 in the college football playoff rankings, and we're all just normal about it. We're used to that. Like, there's not the arguing and the lightning rod aspect of this like there was last year. So it's crazy how quickly that happened, that like we just got used to the idea that Indiana's one of the best teams in the country.
I've been trying to put, Nicole, I've been trying to decipher, as have probably a lot of people, exactly what to pin all of this on. And obviously it starts with Curt Cignetti. I mean, that goes without saying. It seems to me when I watch Indiana from a football standpoint, it reminds me of what Brad Stevens did as the Butler basketball coach. And by that I mean Butler in Brad Stevens' runs, they always knew like where every loose ball was going. They always seemingly knew what the other team was doing before the other team even tried to do it. And it feels like Curt Cignetti is able to do that with Indiana football. Do you see, what would you put your finger on as to what exactly is their formula? Is it preparation? Is it film? What is it exactly?
No, I mean, I think it is preparation based on exactly what you're saying. I mean, that was one of the things that jumped out so much last year as you were watching the history of the program change and getting used to the fact that Indiana, believed that it could be in any game that it was in, but was in those games. It was the preparation. Like, it's just a well-prepared team. Like, they never seem surprised. They rarely have pre-snap penalties. And when they do, that's what really fires up Cignetti, because he gets mad because there's no excuse for that, right? And so I think, to me, that is the biggest difference, and that speaks to preparation. And it's the little things that ultimately end up deciding a lot of games, but it's the attention to detail that puts you in those situations to begin with. So yeah, I mean, obviously, Sig is a film junkie, and he's watching and looking for every possible edge and how an opponent is going to respond to something. But obviously that infiltrates the entire team, because they're so well coached. They're in the right spots. They're anticipating the plays. And when they have been down in games, they don't really flinch. They're very unflappable. So all of that comes from, obviously, the coaching staff and the continuity with this coaching staff, that these are a lot of folks that have been with Cignetti for a lot of years. But it's pretty remarkable how well that has translated down to the players as well, and how they handle in-game moments as well. Is
Mendoza the front runner right now for the Heisman?
Yes, he is, but I don't think that this is like a slam dunk yet. This has been a very weird Heisman race where I feel like week to week, there wasn't a clear front runner coming in. It was just kind of like a list of like, here are 10 quarterbacks, a lot of them in the SEC, and a lot of those quarterbacks had bad years. And then it was just kind of like week to week, the odds would change because no one really, kind of jumped up and grabbed it. I feel like the Heisman is going to come down to the Big Ten championship game.
Right.
I think it will be between Fernando Mendoza and Julian Sayin, and we'll see how the game goes. We'll see, how much credit Julian Sayin gets for whatever Ohio State does. Is it going to be their offense? Is it going to be their defense? Whatever that might look like. But to me, that it feels like we're setting up for that. And I think right now, yes, I think Fernando Mendoza is the front runner, but I just feel like knowing that there's a game of that magnitude that these two teams are like on a collision course for, lets me just kind of put this off for a couple weeks as a Heisman voter. That last weekend is right before the deadline, and I feel like it will decide itself.
How big a gap do you see between Ohio, if you do? I mean, I don't want to be presumptuous there, but between Ohio State and Indiana?
It's a good question, and I'm very interested to find the answer because, Ohio State has looked like a team with very many weaknesses. If they have them at all this year, I think, obviously we all raved about the defense in that game against Texas. And the defense has shown up all season long. The offense has been the more interesting story to me because I think you have two of the best receivers in the country. They're also dealing with injuries. So this is, a question of, how healthy can they be for the most meaningful games, Michigan and onward for them this season. But also, just like, okay, so week one, Julian Sayin didn't really have like the full arsenal. Like they didn't call the game. It wasn't as open as it is now as an offensive standpoint. So there were times where, okay, they were focused on running the ball. Hey, were they going to get more explosive in the pass game? Now we've seen that. Like Julian Sayin is incredibly accurate. I mean, he's the completion percentage and just the gap between him and the next best quarterback is astounding. And it's one of those historic seasons from that perspective. But there's also this efficiency. So we've seen him be an accurate deep ball passer. We've wondered, okay, how about the run game? When they need to lean on it, can they do that? And they're figuring that out. But the efficiency is the most interesting part because they're not on the field for that many snaps. So they're trying to stay fresh, knowing what it took to get to that last game in January last year. So it's all really intriguing. But it's also a team that really hasn't been pushed in quite some time. And that's why I think the Indiana game would be really, really interesting because Indiana has performed so much better this season when they have played teams with better athletes. And that was the issue last year. But this would be a great test, knowing, of course, that they weren't on the regular season calendar, but it's felt destined that they were going to meet in the Big Ten championship game for some time. So that like both sides will be prepared for it. But with a team that has won in some of the toughest environments in college football, has beaten teams, again, that are going to like on paper have more talent than them. And then you get them at the end of the year when you've kind of learned so much about yourself already. That's what's going to be really interesting. I think there is a gap, coming into that game in a hypothetical. But again, Indiana has performed at a higher level than they did last year. And I think, Fernando Mendoza is a huge part of that. Omar Cooper, like the receiver, like there's so much talent there and talent that's been developed even from week one to now. That I'm really intrigued to see what that gap looks like. But I do think Ohio State is the best team in the country and has been, but I would love to see them push to actually learn if that's true.
That's the voice of Nicole Auerbach from NBC, my guest on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Nicole, I want to go back to something you mentioned there. You said you're a Heisman voter, correct?
Yes.
What is for our listeners, just to, I guess, add perspective here or shed light on it, when you are a voter of the Heisman, is there a particular criteria that you are told, hey, like I'm a voter on a couple of panels and there are specific things they say, like you are looking at this or you need to prioritize this, etc. Do you get any sort of a clarification of what it is that you're supposed to be voting on, or is it literally just a ballot that says, who do you think is the best player in the country?
Yeah, I mean, there really isn't a ton more than what you would expect. And this is why, like, this award is so interesting, because, there's language about, like, the most outstanding player. But a lot of people view it as, like, the MVP of the best team.
Right.
A lot of people lately have viewed it largely as a quarterback award, although last year was proud of the voting base for not doing that, for voting for a two-way player and a running back, as they were the clear front runners all season. So I think that it has enough wiggle room where it's just one of these awards where each individual voter thinks about it a little bit differently. I know people, especially when you're having a receiver conversation, right? So, it's hard for a receiver to win the award. And, I've had people say about Julian saying, okay, well, can you vote for him if he's not actually the best player on their offense? And it's like, well, yeah, but it comes down to credit sometimes for some of these. Like when Devontae Smith won it and Mac Jones was a finalist. It's like, well, are you going to vote for someone who you personally don't believe is the best player on that side of the ball? And so there's just like some layers to that. And there are people, again, who give who are looking a lot more at the wins and loss totals, and they want a team that is one of the best in the country, or a team that is in contention. It's been a while since, Johnny Manziel won on a 9-3 team, but he had the Heisman moments against Alabama. So it continues to evolve, but I think there's definitely enough wiggle room for people to decide either like a most individually outstanding player, regardless of kind of context around them, versus like MVP on, a team that might win it all, which I feel like is the way that a lot of people tend to lean. Although again, last year was like a different race. I don't think people thought Colorado was going to win a national title. They weren't going to be in the playoff. Boise was, but like it wasn't necessarily about that. It was more like outstanding and seeing something you've never seen before. So it's. I'm not giving you a great answer because I just think it's different for different people, and there's so many voters that you're just sort of you're not sure how it's going to go. There's only 3 names on the ballot. I wish there were 5. I wish they set a minimum of 5 finalists that get to go to New York. I don't see why we can't celebrate more and more players. But that also ends up being a limiting factor too, in terms of, how the finalists votes go, if there's clear frontrunners or if there's not, and then the votes for the top 10 end up being very scattered. So it's very hit or miss, and you're just kind of hoping that all the other voters are watching all of the players in college football, that they're staying up late for the late night games, that they're watching games that may not be as competitive, and not just relying on highlight packages, but you don't know for sure.
Lastly, Nicole, Notre Dame, with where they stand right now, assuming they win out, okay, is that enough to keep them within that top 12 for the playoff? But with Miami 13, who has beaten Notre Dame and still has the opportunity to get a win over a ranked team in Pitt, even though Notre Dame also beat Pitt, could that be enough that we then see a late season flop and Notre Dame is then out?
I think Notre Dame is in and should be in. I know that there's a huge, loud audience that's arguing for exactly what you are, or just that these two teams should be close enough to be compared and use the tiebreaker, which head-to-head is listed officially as a tiebreaker. And the committee has argued they have not been close enough to use a tiebreaker. And that has, you saw Vanderbilt a few spots ahead of Texas, the same situation. I think that those teams are different. I mean, I believe in Notre Dame and how well they've been playing since week 2, and again that those are 2 really, really good losses with a brand new quarterback. I think that context should matter, and we don't have to decide things based on a 3-point game 2.5 months ago. But I understand the argument for head-to-head. Again, if these 2 teams are comparable, I actually think the argument should be that both of those teams should be in. And you could, I was a little surprised that more people weren't just kind of fixating this week on, okay, well, if we're saying Alabama's loss to FSU is so bad and it dropped them all the way down, they're the last at-large team in. Well, Miami beat FSU. What are we doing, right? Just kind of framing the argument a little bit differently. But it does feel like that Alabama buffer, and potentially if Oregon were to lose and probably fall into that range, could be enough of a buffer for Notre Dame that they would not need to use that tiebreaker against Miami. So that's where I see it right now. Again, the committee can change its mind and change its its explanations week to week. But it does feel like there is enough of a separation and a lot of common opponents between Notre Dame and Miami that they could stay ahead with enough space, or we reframe the conversation a little bit and start looking at that last SEC team that's trying to get in and compare them to some of these other teams on the bubbles that we've been talking about.
Before becoming the youngest winner of the National Sports Media Association's National Sports Writer of the Year Award, Nicole was a Michigan Wolverine, which is why we played Mr. Brightside, which they play at the Big House at every game. And I don't know if that made you homesick or if you're simply sick of hearing that song, Nicole, but I hope you at least enjoyed that on the way. And appreciate the time today. Certainly enjoy the weekend for college football games, all right?
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Nicole Auerbach joining us from NBC talking college football. We can also, perhaps really good information there, it goes without saying, have her on during basketball season as well because covers a little of that as well. So very much appreciated. All right, we come back. Let's get back into it in terms of Daniel Jones. We have more information on the calf injury. We will tell you about it next. Want to point out, by the way, as we listen to Nirvana here, and no matter what your taste in music may be, and we've got news on Daniel Jones to get to in just a second here. Eddie, your favorite song of all time is what?
I have no idea.
I have I'm one of those. If I were to ask you, and if I said your weekend assignment is to really think about it and come up with what your favorite song is, I have like three that kind of float through. You know what I mean? Like I'll say like it's my favorite song ever, and then I'll go back to another one. I'm like, I don't know, this is my favorite song ever. This is my favorite. Bottom line is, music is it does so many things. It can associate you to, it can take you back to a place, it can take you back to a time. And music also can serve as a way to bring people together in terms of philanthropy. That is the case for Concerts for a Cause, which just got done wrapping up their season. Bruce Kidd puts together each year different concerts that are local musicians and regional musicians, with all of the money being raised going to a number of different charities and philanthropies around town. And I've known Bruce for a number of years and love his heart and his passion for raising money for those that need it. And I am absolutely delighted, thrilled, honored, and more than anything else, full of gratitude over the fact that the money that he raised for Concerts for a Cause this year, he is going to use part of that to make a donation to both Firefly for the Hope for the Holidays for families in need at Christmas, and as well Wheeler Mission for the Drumstick Dash. So very much appreciate, and Concerts for a Cause, absolutely. If you hear of that fundraising effort and you hear of that, you know, the different shows that are being put on over the course of the year, then absolutely know that not only are you getting great music, but you're doing it and helping out other people in the community.
Is that link on your Twitter, by the way, Jake?
I have not. You know what? So when I signed up for
Twitter,
the Wheeler Mission, when I signed up for it, and there's the link to be able to give money, and I hate to say this, I can't find the link in the email, so I need to get a hold of them so that I can then put it up. So I said yesterday by the end of the day, and then I just sent out the request for it, so hopefully by the end of today, we'll have that link where people can also give. So thank you for mentioning that, because I do want to get that out there so people that can give, even if you don't want to do. There's still time to sign up for the Drumstick Dash, and I've got that up on my Twitter account as well, where you can find the link to sign up for the Drumstick Dash to raise money for Wheeler Mission, and I'll get the link also where you can make a donation for it. Eddie Daniel Jones, what we know today that we did not know when we started the show is what?
He was back out at practice today, and it looked like he was all systems go. Didn't seem like there were any setbacks or limitations. And Kevin Bowen, who will join us at 2 o'clock, said that looked like a guy who is starting on Sunday, in his opinion. So it didn't look like he had any limitations or seemed he was like favoring it or anything like that.
And again, I go back to, with calf injuries like that, in any injury, you know, we don't know the severity of it. It could have been literally that he had. Have you ever gotten a cramp, by the way?
Like a Charlie horse?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Calf or hamstring?
Calf.
Let me tell you something. Now, do you know the mustard trick? Have I told you the mustard trick? Have we gone over the mustard trick?
No.
Here is a Jake Query witch doctor theorem.
Oh, is this supposed to be like the pickle juice?
Yes.
Pickle
juice
mustard,
or mustard,
no.
either one. There's some sort of a weird enzyme within the vinegar or whatever else.
Enzyme?
I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Some sort of an enzyme. I don't know if you know this or not, Eddie, but when you're talking scientifically, if you're not sure the right word, enzyme works every time.
Okay.
Enzyme is like the WD-40 of the medical world. You just throw out the word enzyme. Put some enzyme on it, you're good, right? What do you need for that? You just need an enzyme. But if you get a Charlie horse, little mustard, little pickle juice immediately takes care of it. I got a hamstring Charlie horse on the flight for my vacation at about, as I was trying to sleep on the plane. Not good. And you can't stretch your leg out, right?
Ah, my leg! My leg!
Not good, man. I'm sitting there like it is. And, of course, it's everybody on the plane's asleep, and I'm trying not to wake anybody up.
Shannon.
Just a complete disaster.
Can you rub my leg here?
Total disaster.
You know, Bob at my gym says these are like trampolines.
Bob has said that, yes. Good recall. Bob has stretched me out and said my hamstrings are literally, he's like, these things, it's incredible. Yeah. But we don't know the severity of what the calf injury was, is my point. It could have been that he just needed a little pickle juice to take care of a cramp. It could have been that he has a strain there. But as of right now, it looks like Daniel Jones good to go. Hoop last night, Indiana-Purdue. What did we learn from either? We'll discuss next. Butler in action today, about an hour from now, as a matter of fact. You can hear that on our sister station, Fuego. And then, of course, Butler games also going to be heard here throughout the course of the year on The Fan. Also, Monday, Eddie, I'm going to be on the road, right? This is, and I'm excited about this.
The road
Indy
trip.
Ignite. Do we have road trip music by chance?
I don't think we do.
Do we have the airplane sounder? Well, it's not that far. We're going to Fishers, right? Thank you.
You're welcome.
I look forward to this coming up. This is all part of the Indy Ignite. And the Indy Ignite a year ago was their inaugural season, professional volleyball, of course. They play at the Fishers Event Center, which is a beautiful venue. And I know that I have mentioned this several times, but I'm going to mention it again. A year ago, the Indy Ignite reached out and just said, hey, would any of you like to come to a match? And I thought, okay. And I went in partially almost out of intrigue for the venue more than just for the team itself. Open disclaimer. I mean, I readily admit it. I walked in, and the buzz and the hysteria, and this is what I truly mean this. What I loved about it was I'm going in, and I'm like, okay, a pro volleyball league. Is this men's volleyball, women's? I didn't even know. I was totally unaware of what it was, naive to it. The amount of enthusiasm and excitement for this team that I walked into, I mean, a sold-out, arena, and I thought, well, this is, it's new. This isn't going to sustain. Then they start playing, and I'm watching the athleticism and the speed and just kind of the energy of pro volleyball. And I think we ended up going to 4 or 5 games last year, and I loved it. And one of the things that I loved about it, aside from the athleticism and it's a very momentum-driven game, is volleyball. And one of the things that I truly enjoyed about it was it opened my eyes up to, and it is my fault that I needed my eyes open to this. It was my fault. But the enthusiasm for volleyball, in particular for young girls and young women in this area, nationwide, obviously, but we talk so much about basketball, as we're about to here with IU and Purdue in action last night, and the AAU circuit and summer baseball and all of the different sports. I think that I was, as somebody who doesn't have kids, I was naive to the level of passion for the travel volleyball circuit. And for young girls that are playing volleyball to then now have an aspiration or a target point and role models to be able to watch was super cool to me. And I became a fan of just going to the events because they were fun and I loved the energy of it. Well, the Indy Ignite, which is the professional volleyball team that plays in Fishers, they have their upcoming draft. That league, the Professional Volleyball League, has their 2026 draft, 2025 draft, but for the 26th season, coming up on Monday. And so we are going to be at Parks Place Pub right there. If you show up in Indy Ignite gear, free lunch. Can't beat that. There are going to be players that are going to be on site with me, and the draft is going to be going on as I'm there from 12 until 3 at Parks Place Pub, which is right up in Fishers, right off of the Fishers Town Center at 116th Street, right there off of I-69. J&V's been there a lot. It's a fabulous place. So I look forward to being there. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. And then December 12th, I think the Indy Ignite are going to have kind of an open house where you can bring your daughter over to meet some of the players, meet Pepper, which is the mascot. I like mascots. Eddie, did you know that?
I do.
I have a selfie with Pepper and a selfie with the Oregon Duck. Right?
Quack, quack.
And I have a Pepper hat too. I might wear my Pepper hat to the show on Monday.
I do.
But
have
I'd
a
love to
question,
see
though.
everybody there from 12 until 3.
When you go to the drumstick dash, do they have a?
You know what? There is a turkey there. Yes, there's a turkey mascot. What running
That's what I was
around.
asking. Yeah,
Huh? Yeah.
yeah.
And listen, the turkey mascot, I always feel bad for. Do you remember? I don't know if anybody remembers this. I might be the only person that remembers this. About probably 10 years ago, I got to think, it would have been Sunday Night Football. Collinsworth's on Sunday Night Football, right?
Yes.
So it was on Sunday Night Football, the Sunday before Thanksgiving. And during one of the commercial breaks, they showed the bumper video, if you will, of like a semi truck with like 1,000 turkeys on the back of it, like pulling out of a farm. And Chris Collins was like, there they go. They're on their way. And it was like a firestorm because people are like, whoa, like it's one thing to enjoy turkey for Thanksgiving dinner. But like, I don't need to see these poor turkeys on their way to, you know what I mean, getting ready to the butterball plant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a little much.
To the butcher?
Yeah, a little much, right? And like, I was way older than I probably should have been when I realized that when you're on the interstate and you're behind like the semi that has got all the piggies on it, you know, you're like, yeah, okay. You start thinking about it, like you kind of feel bad about it, right?
You never know. It could be being transported to a farm.
Mm-hmm.
State Fair could be in town. You never know.
You know what happens at the State Fair, don't you, Eddie?
Don't tell me.
I don't know if you know this or not, but when I was on the morning show in WIBC, we raised money and bought one of the pigs at the State Fair, and he moved to a farm in Zionsville. True story.
Really?
Yep, true story. Okay, last night, college basketball. First off, Purdue, and this was fun, I thought. They had prom last night, right? They played in a ballroom. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
You know,
in Baha Mar.
Now, is this... I'm going to I'm going to admit again my ignorance once again. Today's like an ignorance admitting Friday, right? Literally. The things I'm dumb about.
What are you people? On dope?
Yes, I am. With multiple things today. I'm naive to the volleyball dealio. I was naive to the piggies going to market dealio and the turkeys. And I am naive about this, okay? I know that we, as we talked about yesterday, forever with college basketball this time of year. And I love this time of year, especially when I was a student, like in college. You'd come home at Thanksgiving break or Christmas break, sit around. There's tons of games on. You're getting together with your buddies. You're going out. And there were all these tournaments. The Great Alaska Shootout, the Maui Invitational, you know, the traditional shootouts. Then it became, obviously, Atlantis. Deeper than Atlantis. That's an X-Clan reference. Now this one, is this a different one, Eddie? Is this a new tournament? I'm admitting my ignorance here. Do we know?
I'm not sure. I'd have to do some research on Baha Mar.
Yeah, because there have been other tournaments. The Atlantis is the Bahamas, is it not? Is this the same one?
No, the Atlantis, isn't Atlantis in Georgia?
No, the Atlantis tournament, hang on, I'm looking. That would be the Atlanta tournament, right? The Atlantis Bahamas, okay? So there's a resort where the Atlantis tournament takes place, but I want to know if this is the same tournament as that.
No.
It is different.
It is. It's the Baha Mar Championship.
Okay. But that's also in the Bahamas, is it not?
It is in the Bahamas, yes.
Okay. During COVID, I got a phone call, and I can't remember if it would have been in 2020. Obviously, the shutdown of COVID was in March, April. And then if you recall, there was this second wave of COVID that happened later that fall, like in October, right around now, I think. And I got a phone call one day that said, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, well, I'm unemployed, so not a lot. And they said, can you do a game for, I can't remember if it was NBC DC or something like that, Comcast, Washington, D.C. And I said, well, what game is it? And they said, we have a court set up in the convention center here in Indianapolis. There's a court that is set up because they just had some sort of an exhibition where they had a basketball court and they still had it out there. And Loyola of Chicago, Porter Moser was the coach at Loyola Chicago. Loyola Chicago had some game on their schedule that was canceled because of COVID. Like schools were, some were playing, some weren't. It was in basketball. It was the beginning of the season. And so they said Loyola, since their game was canceled, called Richmond to see if Richmond could play a game. And the NCAA said, okay, you guys can do this make good game, but you've got to both go to Indianapolis. We have a court set up in the convention center in Indianapolis since the NCAA is based here, and no one's allowed in. Literally, we'll have two broadcasters, have to wear masks, and then the court, and that's it, and the officials. So Megan McEwen and I did the game itself, and it
Friday,
was
December 18th.
Is that when it was?
Mm-hmm.
2020 or 21? 2020, right?
It would have been 2020, yes.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Richmond won, right?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay. So we did that game, but it was so weird because it was just in this convention center, one of the expo halls of the convention center. And that's what this game looks like for Purdue. Now, the thing about Purdue last night, and there's a good and a bad that you can take from this performance last night. And again, I do have concern, and I'm being serious about that court, because at one point in Memphis, I thought Memphis looked good. Now Memphis is coming off of, that's their third straight loss. They lost to UNLV and Ole Miss. So I have no idea how good Memphis is supposed to be this year. But there were two takeaways I had from watching Memphis. The first being, I thought it was a really good test for Purdue because Memphis had a lot of size on the wings in particular and a lot of athleticism. And they were resilient. I mean, each time Purdue would get like a 7-point lead, Memphis would go on, a 9-2 run or a 10-3 run and square it back up. Mm-hmm. So Purdue had to make multiple answers in that game. And at one point late in the game, Memphis had made a run. The game's tied. Timeout's called. And I'm looking at the Memphis huddle, and I'm seeing this face in the background, and I'm thinking, I know that guy. I know that guy. And then I looked it up, and yes, in fact, and I don't know if they made mention of this last night on the broadcast. They may have. Mike Davis, assistant coach for Memphis, former Indiana coach. But the game itself, the thing that jumped out to me was twofold. Number one, Purdue obviously, and we knew this going in, is very balanced, okay? I mean, we knew that. And they can score or beat you in multiple ways and areas, okay? But the thing about Purdue is even on an off night, and I think last night, I don't know if you'd say it was an off night because they weathered every storm, but I don't think Purdue is a team this year that is going to start winning games resoundingly every game.
Did you see what Fletcher Lawyer said after the game?
I did not.
So the goal that they were shooting at in the first half was not the same or regulation height. It was a little higher. He felt like it just felt off. Like the rim or something about it was not right. And Purdue was like 1 of 10 in the first half or something, or Memphis was 1 of 10 on threes in the second half after, shooting a respectable percentage in the first half. And then Purdue was able to knock down all of the scoring for Fletcher Lawyer was in the second half on the opposite end.
Now, interesting you mentioned that. This brings up like the old Rick Mount story at Iowa, right? Back in the day in the Big Ten when they would play games simply on Thursday and on Saturday, I think it was, and Purdue was playing at Iowa on a Saturday, and Rick Mount goes out and misses like his first 6 shots and goes over to the official and says, that rim's bent. Like, what are you talking about? He says, the rim's bent. And they get up on a ladder and they look at it and like, oh my gosh, it's cocked like 1/8 of an inch to the right. And they straighten the rim, and then Mount hits like his next 9 shots. And it had been bent in the game that was on Thursday, and they played on Saturday. Dead-eye shooters can see that kind of thing, Eddie. They can. Mm-hmm. And Fletcher Lawyer, you could tell he had it going. That was the point I was going to make is I think Purdue is going to be a team this year that is going to be like Bowser the Dragon in Super Mario Brothers. Every time you think you have them down, they have the ability, because they have so many different guys that can catch that lightning in a bottle, and they are veteran players, that they're going to have different heroes on different nights that step up. And last night I thought it was Fletcher Lawyer. I mean, he had a stretch there. I know he was 4-10 from three-point range, but he had a stretch where he hit 2 of them in about a 90-second spot, and they were just kind of like, we're not going away. This is who we are. Good luck trying to stop us level plays. And then it goes without saying that Braden Smith continued to he did not shoot the ball well. Again, did not shoot the ball well. Braden Smith had an off night in that standpoint. But the way that he can get others involved, the vision that he has, the emphatic nature in which he can just make a difference with his presence. Now, he did slip on that logo, and that was one of them that, yes, it's what it sounded like. It's what it sounded like last night, right? And so now they get Texas Tech next, right? Which is a good test.
Yes.
Because Texas Tech reminds me, like I mentioned, of, say, Kurt Signetti's Indiana team.
9:30 tonight. So you
in
can
the
watch
fact that
Pacers, Cavs, and then
Texas Tech is just very well coached.
Yeah.
And they They get to the right spots on the floor like all the time. Now, let me ask you also this while we're talking college basketball before we get to Indiana.
So don't let. Just know I'm not letting that slide. That was a bad analogy with Bowser. Bad analogy there.
I disagree.
Bad analogy.
I think that's the perfect illustration. I think people know exactly what I'm talking about.
Bad analogy.
Did you ever play Super Mario Brothers?
Oh, yeah, Jake.
Okay.
That was my jam.
Now, I want to know if I'm the only one that's noticed this year. It's completely thrown me off, and I've not gotten used to it. Okay?
Is it Braden Smith's teeth?
Excuse me?
Braden Smith's teeth? You know he got those veneers?
Did he really?
Not a big fan of him.
The Dan Weldon look?
The Freddie Freeman look.
Okay. No. I need you, Eddie Garrison. Matter of fact, if any of you right now are listening at work, of course, if you're listening at work and you're listening online, don't do what I'm about to say unless you're using your phone. Don't go away from the website that you're on right now listening to my voice if that's how you're listening to me. But if you are somewhere where you have me on a radio and you're near a website, I need you to go to ESPN.com. This is going to be an exercise here, okay?
Okay.
Eddie, if you could, please go to ESPN.com.
I'm here.
Okay, now, I want you to click on the box score. Are we going to go? We'll stick with Purdue here, okay? Click on the box score of the Purdue-Indiana game.
Okay.
Okay, now, look at me. Don't look there yet, okay? I want you to name a Purdue player for me.
Braden Smith.
Braden Smith. I need you to tell me how many points he had as soon as you look at the box score. Go.
Okay, let me get there. He had 5.
Did your eye immediately go to the far right-hand column?
No, because I'm used to this now.
When did they begin this? This is completely throwing me off because ESPN somehow, and I don't know when this took place, but it used to, for literally, okay, I'm over a half century old. Literally for the vast majority of that half century, every time I open a box score, the total number of points is the last column on the right-hand side. Now, all of a sudden, it's the second column. And then sometimes from an NBA standpoint, they put minutes in the far right-hand column.
Yep.
So I'm overseas on vacation, and I'm looking up. Shannon says, like, hey, what happened in the Pacer game? I go, I don't know. Let me look. So I look at the box score, and I pull it up, and I'm like, holy cow. Unbelievable. I'm like, look at the balance of this. Pascal Siakam had 32. Isaiah Jackson had 29. Ben Shepherd had 27 tonight. And then I'm like, wait a minute, that's minutes. When did this happen where they flip-flop this? Because I can't get used to it. This literally, I'm driving in Ireland is what I'm doing here.
In October.
This year.
Yes.
Who in the hell came up with this idea?
No idea.
Am I the only person? I'd like to know if I'm the only person that has noticed this, number one, and number two, is completely thrown off kilter for it. Because literally, I'm running around, and it's like, you ever have one of those days where you're running around and your shirt's inside out? And it's like 2 p.m, you look, and you're like, oh my gosh, the tag is like on the back. You ever had that happen? T-shirt, anything?
Yep.
That's how I'm feeling right now. My buddy Daryl Page, I worked with at Channel 6, great guy. One day I walk in, I look down, I go, Daryl, you're wearing 2 different shoes. Huh? You're wearing 2 different shoes. What are you talking about? You got on a loafer and a tennis shoe. Oh my gosh, I got dressed in the dark. That's how I'm feeling looking at this deal. Completely thrown me off. Now, Lindenwood yesterday taking on Indiana. Now, Indiana to me is obviously more intriguing than is Purdue because of the fact that with Indiana, you don't have the familiarity, nor do they have it with one another, that you get clearly with Purdue. Because Purdue, the roster itself, we're starting to get to know Indiana a little bit better, goes without saying. But the schedule is such that with Indiana, I think Indiana is going to be really good, but at the same time, I have to continue to remind myself and kind of temper my expectations based on the fact that how many true tests have they had. I thought Marquette was a really good test for them, and they were outstanding against Marquette. But again, last night, one of those games, kind of like what they had earlier in the week, where you anticipated that it would be, you would anticipate against a Lindenwood that you're going to go out and you're going to take complete control of that game.
It makes me wonder this, Jake. Based off the last 2 games where you're playing inferior opponents and you come up to play in the exhibition against Baylor, you come out, you perform well, you beat Baylor at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, neutral floor. You come out and you play in Chicago on a neutral floor against Marquette and you play well. Is this Hoosiers team going to be one of those teams that plays up to the competition but also plays down to the competition as well?
I think I don't know that we know yet, though, just because we don't know who they are, right? And by that I mean this. With Purdue, I talked about their balance, and you know that at any point they can go to a number of different guys. Lawyer can get it going. If he doesn't, Braden Smith. Braden Smith last night, an off night. He gets Lawyer involved. Trey Kaufman-Renn, is as stable as it gets, right? And they now have help for him on the rebounding side of things. But they have a number of different guys they can go to that if one's not feeling it, another is. And they have a point guard that knows the personnel like the back of his hand. From Indiana's standpoint, I think we know that Tucker DeVries that's your guy. He is your lightning in a bottle. He's going to feel it. He can hit from anywhere, score. He is a flat-out scorer, no doubt. He's an over 2,000-point scorer in college basketball. But I don't know that Indiana's players know themselves well enough now to know. Like Lamar Wilkerson is indeed a get-my-own-shot, heat-check guy. But outside of that, do we know what other players, who they go to? Do they, does Connor Enright know, okay, I got to get Reed Bailey in this spot. This is where he can get comfortable to get things going. Does he know, okay, Trent Sisley, who's a freshman and played well last night, I thought, in stretches. I know where he likes it. I know that he can provide this for me. I think Indiana is still feeling out and understanding how they distribute that around and figuring out who their guy is. And they need a third scorer for sure. I think Reed Bailey can be that. And I think by the end of the year, people are really going to like Tatum Conaway and his ability to kind of distribute as well. But I just think that as we are still, it's like in Hoosiers when Gene Hackman, when Norman Dale says, the guys are, I'm still getting to know them a little bit and figure them out. I think that's what Indiana's feeling about themselves. They are still, and so you can look at Indiana's schedule and you can say, look, they haven't truly been tested yet, except for Marquette, but and they weren't even tested in that game. But I think that part of the test for Indiana is simply the familiarity of figuring out who exactly they are. But I think you got to be happy with, obviously at 5-0, you're happy with it. But it took them a while last night before they finally got that separation. But Tucker DeVries is a really good player, and he's probably going to average 20 a game for them this year. They just need, and Wilkerson will be their second leading scorer, no question. They've got to figure out where the stability comes beyond that. Semi-state in football, Kyle Neddenriep going to be covering all of it. We'll find out where he's going to be and what he's going to watch. We're going to find it out next. One of my favorite days of the year. Matter of fact, it might be my favorite day of the year. I love everything about it.
Every day we do this show together because you get to work with me. Is that what it is?
Okay. Eddie, you're like bourbon.
Everyone loves bourbon.
It's an acquired taste, right?
No, everyone loves bourbon.
I think I told you I've never had bourbon before until my 50th birthday. My buddy Scott McConnell shows up at my party and goes, "Yeah, I realized I hadn't bought you anything, so I went across the street and bought you a bottle of bourbon."
Any relation to TJ?
No relation to TJ.
Okay.
Scott McConnell, although probably would like to be of relation to TJ. But he got me a bottle of Jefferson's Reserve, which is a really good bourbon.
Yeah.
And it sat probably for a year in my house. Then finally one night I decided to try it. And I've got to admit, I was like, I called McConnell and I go, "I think you ruined me because you bought me a really good bourbon. And so now I enjoy it. And so now I'm getting into it." But previous to that, when it comes to bourbon, I was completely lost.
Speaking of lost and clueless, we bring on Kyle Neddenriep from the Indy Star.
That's exactly right. We do exactly that on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. IHSAA semi-state football weekend. What I was going to say is one of my favorite weekends of the year is next Friday night. The night after Thanksgiving, high school football state finals getting underway. Everything, the magic of downtown, getting ready for the holiday season. But you got to play the semi-state games first. Kyle joins us to talk about exactly that. Kyle Neddenriep, there are obviously at this point 12 remaining teams I take that back, 24 remaining teams amongst the 6 classes. You will be at what game tonight?
Yeah, I'll be at Brownsburg for the Warren Central Brownsburg game, 6A South semi-state.
And I will show we've talked so much about Brownsburg this year. We have not talked as much about Warren Central. So pardon my ignorance on this question. Is this a bit of a surprise for Warren Central to be here at this point, or was this an expected collision?
No, I would say it's a bit of a surprise. I think going into the year, you probably pencil in Center Grove for this game, because that's kind of been normally when Center Grove gets to the regional, they don't lose that game. And they had beaten Warren several times in a row. As the year went along, Warren looked like a team that, could challenge them, and then, went on a little bit of a losing streak, 3-game losing streak. And then, they do have a very, I would say an easier route in the sectional, but then once you get to that regional, it gets a lot tougher, obviously, with Center Grove. But they played really well last week, and they do have, I would say that the interesting matchup tonight, I think Warren's offense will do some damage. They have a really good running back named Keon Thomas, who's a junior. Purdue and IU are after him, among others. But very good receivers. They got some junior guys who are really good, and a quarterback who's a sophomore who's going to be really good. Is already a promising young player, Jack Quillen. So there's talent there. The curiosity I have is how that Warren defense holds up against Brownsburg's offense, which has been so good throughout the year. Can they get pressure? Can they stop the run? I'm really curious on that side of the ball, kind of how that happens tonight. And, the weather, could play a factor more than other games have this year. So that's something with all these games tonight that weather could factor in.
Kyle, it seems to me, and you tell me if I'm wrong, if you had to look at a team that the weather could impact, Brownsburg, from what I understand and what I've seen this year, that's a team that if you're going to use a college term here, like Ohio State, they got guys that can beat you in space, right? I mean, they got guys that can get behind a defense, make plays for you, and they can go to the air and rely on that a lot, and that could be impacted tonight, correct?
For sure, yeah. That's definitely something to watch, and I think, I also look at that Brownsburg team. I covered them last week against Decatur, and their offensive line was really good, and they were able to run the ball, and they've done that, pretty consistently throughout the year. They're really good at mixing it up, and Oscar Fry and their court and their receivers Brandon Sharp and Avon Robinson and Tez Virgil and those guys are really good too in space, like you said, but I think if Brownsburg has to line up and run the ball, they can do it. I think that's going to be, and I think Warren, that's kind of what they want to play off of a little bit too. So, I think it's two teams that are equipped to, they want to both, kind of use their weapons in space, but I think teams that can run and will try to run, especially pending the weather tonight.
Okay, the other side of it in 6A, Westfield, obviously locally, but now they've got Carroll out of Fort Wayne. What sort of matchup does Westfield find themselves getting into?
Yeah, and I got some word this morning that it sounds like Deacon King, the Westfield running back, who, he's had an ankle sprain and's only been playing mostly safety here lately, but it sounds like he's going back to running back tonight, so that's a good sign for Westfield going into that big game. Carroll is more of and if you notice, Carroll, they made it to the state finals 4 years ago. They upset HSE to get there, who were ranked number one in this same round, in the semi-state round. So they do have some experience, in games like this. Although it's been 4 years ago, but at least have a little bit of tradition of doing it in this round. They are more of a passing team. They're really going to want to try to throw it. Gabe Freisinger, their quarterback, has over 3,000 yards passing, and they have a receiver, Jaden Van Pelt, who has caught 66 balls for almost 1,400 yards. So he's a really good receiver. But I think their style sort of plays into Westfield's hands a little bit because they really get after the quarterback. Alex Arambolas is a really good edge rusher going to Grand Valley State. And then, like I said, Deacon King plays safety. They have good coverage guys. So, I think they're in pretty good shape here. I think it'll be kind of Westfield hasn't really blown people out, so I think it'll be a close game still. But I like Westfield to get there. I think we could see a matchup next week of the same matchup we had last year in 6A.
The Kyle Nedrep is my guest from the Indianapolis Stars on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Kyle, one of the stories, we could sit here and talk, obviously, Bloomington South and New Pal and 5A. New Pal, we know how good they are offensively. I think the best story in the state, and it's obviously getting now even national traction, is that of Miles McLaughlin at Knox, who is trying to surpass Derrick Henry for the most rushing yards in high school history, nationally speaking. And I guess a two-part question. The first being, is he going to be able to accomplish that feat? Let's say if they were to lose to Fort Wayne Lures tonight, is he within average of being able to get it? And then number two, what is next for him when you're talking about somebody with that sort of prolific efficiency?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. Dana's going to go up and cover it for us, and I can't wait to see what she ends up writing about or how this game unfolds tonight. But it's a kind of. I had fun this week. We talked to Josh Heron and I. One of our reporters called some coaches around the state just to ask about McLaughlin and why it's so hard to stop him. Because really, what they do on, you watch it on film. And I went up to Knox this year and talked to him and went to a practice, and it looks pretty simple. He takes the handoff and he runs, one way or another, and kind of this is how he does it. It's a little bit more intricate, obviously, than that, but yeah, I mean. He's in range. I mean, it's 364 tonight. He would have to hit 364 to break the record, which sounds crazy, but it's basically what he's been doing, all season long. So, that number is attainable. Whether Lures allows that to happen is another thing. Lures has a really good defensive line. They're seniors. They're athletic guys up front. They're a little bit younger on the offensive side, but they are talented on that side as well. Lures' record, it's kind of like Cathedral. Their record during the season may not always look great, but it's because they play 6A teams and really good programs in Fort Wayne every year. So they're better than their record shows. They're 8-5, but that's sort of meaningless. But yeah, I mean, talking to some coaches, they feel like this is kind of a coin flip game. So even if he doesn't break it and Knox wins, he could break it next week if they make the state finals, and that'd be obviously a cool story too. But I don't have a good hand. It's hard to know, how this matchup will go because there's not a lot of, common opponents between the two of them. So, you can't really go the comparison route, but he's going to get his carries tonight, and that, there's no doubt about that. And he's a kid who seems to get stronger as the game progresses. So, that's another thing too, and he may break a 70-yarder at some point. So, and then what's next for him? He got offered by Ball State recently. I know he went to South Dakota not too long ago. It's sort of that level of what's looking at him right now. I know he was planning to get up to one of the I want to say it was Central Michigan also. So, sort of that level that's been recruiting him, and obviously a lot of schools that are smaller than that too. But yeah, I mean, and I don't know if he'll play offense or defense in college. That's kind of yet to be determined. He plays defense for his Knox team as well. So he's going both ways pretty much every night.
Kyle, when you look at a guy like that, Brett Law, if we're going to go way back, I mean, at Sheridan, he had prolific numbers. Obviously, Carson Steele, who we just talked about earlier, had prolific numbers. And Steele, worked his way, I remember, at Ball State, and then when he goes to UCLA, people are like, oh, really? And he has over 800 yards, and now, of course, he's still in the league. But guys like that, and I've not seen McLaughlin play. I know that you've gone down and talked to people that have. It would seem as though he would be able to get an opportunity to still be a good back in college because, and you correct me if I'm wrong in this, it's not necessarily like a shiftiness and a breakaway speed that is his strongest suit as much as his vision and ability to know, and his stop and start ability to be able to be patient, to wait for holes and then go through them. And I think that kind of thing can translate at the next level. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right on. I mean, and actually we wrote about that. That was kind of the one thing that kept coming up when you talk to people, and even watching him, it's pretty obvious. Like, he's about the most patient runner you can possibly be. And that kind of vision and feel, is hard to replicate. Even the Angola coach, he's like, last week our scout team quarterback, when we started the week, he was just slamming into the hole. I'm like, no, you gotta wait like he does to give us a good read on what we're looking at. And, and he does that. He'll even ride the running back, the fake handoff, or if he does hand it off, I mean, he'll just kind of ride until the defense, figures out what they're going to do. So he is just super patient and, just really goes where the defense allows him to go, and that sort of, and their blocking scheme is kind of like that too. They kind of push defenders the direction they're already going in a lot of cases. So that's, in that simplified version, I'm not explaining it exactly right, but, he does he's really good at just kind of reading what's there and taking what's there. And then all of a sudden he'll pop one for 60 yards. But yeah, I mean, he's not he is a good athlete, definitely a good athlete. He's super strong. He gets everything out of every run. I mean, he's, and from all, talking to him and then talking to other people, he's really good kid, talk to the coaches after the game, and, good sport type of guy too. So that's good to hear as well. But yeah, I think he'll get a chance somewhere, and it would make sense to try him at running back, to see what he can do. He's not a quarterback, but you could definitely try him at running back and see what that looks like.
Kyle Nedrett, my guest from the Indianapolis Stars on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Kyle, before you go, as we transition now from football into basketball, and I know that, this is the time of year where you start having to kind of cross over in both of those. Basketball standpoint, what's jumped out at you as the things that you're most intrigued by in the upcoming season, be it team or player?
I mean, Luke Ertl's probably the most interesting player going into the year, I would say, is, see if he can kind of replicate what he did last year for Mount Vernon, going to Purdue. So also seeing how he kind of progresses as a point guard as he gets ready, to go play for Purdue the following year. So we'll get plenty of chances to see him play. They have a really tough schedule. They play Fishers early in the year, which is, arguably the best team in the state. I'm also really interested in Pike, seeing Pike and what they look like. They are, probably the best team that they've had here in a while, so, but very tough sectional that they'll have with, several good teams in there, fighting against them. So, see if they can break through. I think that'll be fun to see their 7-footer Isaiah Hill and how he's improved. And then I would just say, probably, what other teams outside of our area, like Crown Point, like Silver Creek, what some of those teams look like. And, kind of as we get into the, there are a couple good events early in December and then later in the Hall of Fame Classic. And, by that point, you have a pretty good handle, I would say, on maybe who at least some of the better teams are and how things, kind of shake out once we get into the second half of the year.
Cal Nedrip, Indianapolis Star will have all of the coverage. Again, Westfield and Fort Wayne Carroll, 7 o'clock tonight. That's 6A. Warren Central and Brownsburg. That's the game where Kyle will be in 6A as well. I'm speaking of the local teams here. Bloomington South and New Pal in 5A. 4A, Roncalli taking on Heritage Hills. And then in 2A, Brownstown Central and LaPel. Class A. Where is Pioneer, by the way? Pioneer and South Adams. Where I always get Clinton Prairie and those schools mixed up with Pioneer. Where's Pioneer? Is that north?
Yeah, Pioneer is up by Logansport, basically.
Okay, so Pioneer and South Adams.
South Adams is over by Fort Wayne area.
And then South Putt and Milan. That's obviously in the southeastern part of the state. Kyle, appreciate the time as always, man.
You bet. Thanks, Jake.
All right, now, Eddie, we've done a lot of sounders today, right?
We have, yeah.
I don't know that we have one, and I don't even know what it would be. A sounder meaning that like we're zeroing in on something, like something's starting to come into focus. You know what I mean? It's you're looking at something, and it's like, and then boom, like it's starting to you're starting to get a clearer picture on something. But we have exactly that when it comes to a huge part of the Colts game against Kansas City from a health standpoint, and not one but two players for the Colts that are on injury report that we have a better understanding of their availability. We'll explain, and Kevin Bowen will join us coming up in about 12 minutes. So top of the show, if you're just joining us,
Where have you been? But
Thank you,
thank
Eddie.
you for joining us now.
I asked Eddie Garrison at the top of the show, I gave him a weekend assignment. It's a tough one. As a matter of fact, if you want to send me your submission at 317, you can also text the show. I've done a terrible job lately of checking the show
text line?
Yeah, my apologies on that. 239-1070, you can always text the show. 239-1070. And I apologize that I have kind of failed in that this week. You can also text me at 523-9288.
What area code is that?
That's 317.
523-9288.
Correct. So just remember May 23rd, because the 500 falls on that every so often. And then I always say for 92-88, for whatever reason, I always think Final Four in Richmond. I go by IU basketball childhood standards. 92, they went to the Final Four. 88, they lost to Richmond. But, Eddie, your assignment over the weekend is to try to determine for me your favorite song of all time. I truly believe it's rare that someone can say definitively, this is my favorite song. Typically, you got like three of them, right?
Yep.
You're like, it's this. Nah, I like that one too. And then a song comes on, you're like, you know what, that might be my favorite song. I have a rotation of like three of them, 3 to 4. Kind of mixes up. We know this about the Colts in terms of their health availability. Daniel Jones practicing today. Kevin Bowen joining us in just about 5. We'll get kind of the latest on how Jones looked. But also, there is news to report on DeForest Buckner from Shane Steichen. Correct, Eddie?
That is correct, Jake.
And that news would be?
That the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts feels, quote, very optimistic that his all-pro defensive tackle will play again this season.
And, of course, is DeForest Buckner, the injured reserve, the 4-game injured reserve with that neck issue that he then went to Panama, got stem cell research. One thing we do know is that Buckner in the past, again, you know me, precedent, he has been a fast healer. So we'll see whether or not that comes into play as well. But as for the quarterback situation, as for what can be expected in Kansas City, Kevin Bowen will join us from the Fan Morning Show. We'll talk about that and more next. I would be surprised if this song is within the top 3 of Kevin Bowen, but it is his top 3 names, right? Rosie, Max, and now Nelly.
Yes,
in the
that
Bowen
is correct.
family.
Yeah.
Kevin Bowen going to join us just a couple minutes from now. Several people have submitted their names or their songs, I should say, for their favorite 3. Desperados, Under the Eaves by Warren Zevon. Warren Zevon, by the way, I love just because, and I'm sure at this point there probably are T-shirts, books, everything else. Enjoy every sandwich, which was such a great line from him when he found out that he had been diagnosed with cancer, and he went on Letterman. Letterman is a huge Warren Zevon fan, and when he had him on, and Letterman said, "Let's get right. Let's get to the chase here. You got some bad news from a health standpoint." And Warren Zevon, or Zevon, however you want to say it, said, I hadn't gone to the doctor in like 25 years, and he said, in hindsight, that was a strategical error, and everyone kind of laughed. And then he said, I was diagnosed with cancer, and he said, I feel fine, but I'm obviously not. And that's when he said, and Letterman said, well, how's it changed you? And he said, I think the only way it's changed me is I just learned to enjoy every sandwich, which is a great line. No question about it.
Now, do you put mustard on the sandwich to prevent the cramping?
That's exactly correct, yes. It's the enzymes.
Now, someone did ask, do you apply the mustard to the cramped area, or
No.
are you taking it out of the pack?
You open the packet, yellow mustard, spit that back. Now, when I did the mini with Mottman last year, I started to get a cramp, and I had mustard packets with me while we were running, and he told me that's a wives' tale. Warren Zevon, thank you, Darren. And I don't know why I say Zevon. Warren Zevon. Obviously, Werewolves of London is his signature song. Somebody else, hey, Jake. Never Been Any Reason by Head East, Hey Jude by the Beatles, and lastly, Fat Bottom Girls by Queen are my 3. Hey Jude is in my 3. I can't get past. I was wondering, actually, if you were to ask the question, what is the most perfect song ever recorded? Hey Jude has to be on the list, except for the fact that you hear within it in the background a mistake that, and including an F-bomb, that during the recording when they made a mistake in the recording, and therefore I don't know that you can say it's the most perfect song ever recorded, except for the fact that their ability to just continue on and carry on during the recording of it kind of makes it, in fact, perfect, that they overcame like that error, if you will. Hey, Jake, is it true that Eddie's favorite song growing up was NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye?
Oh, my gosh, no.
Well, you don't know. Jake, my favorite song, The Story of My Life by One Direction. Fell in love with them with that song just before the concert here at Lucas Oil. That is a good song, actually. Can't deny. You know what's a good song? The Whole of the Moon by, I got to think of who does that song. It's a band. When I went and saw U2, because you mentioned there seeing or getting introduced to a song before a concert, I went to go see U2 in Louisville. And before they came on, they're just playing music, before they came out on stage. And this song, The Whole of the Moon, came on. And I'm like, holy cow, I've never heard this song before. I had never heard it. And did a Shazam or whatever, found out what it was, and then found out that it was actually Bono's favorite band growing up. And that's why they played that song, and immediately did one of those things where I immediately downloaded the song, and it's fabulous. The Waterboys. The Waterboys, a band that did The Whole of the Moon, which is a great song. 239-1070 is the number where you can text us your idea, or, like I said, to my home telephone number of 317-523-9288. Kevin Bowen going to join us just a couple of minutes from now. As a matter of fact, we have him now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line, javahouse.com, where you can go and get the fan bundle. Just enter my name. That's Jake, and you... Matthew from Maine told me that he's getting ready for the holiday season. He got not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 things of the Colombian coffee. Wrangler Energy as well, Liquid Science, all available from javahouse.com. But Kevin joins us now. Kevin, let's get right to it. Health standpoint, Daniel Jones. What do we know about the calf injury? What's the latest? And do we have an idea yet on availability come Sunday?
So Daniel Jones will play. He will start on Sunday. It is now being deemed a fibula injury, not a calf injury. I guess initially when he expressed some discomfort yesterday during practice, I guess it was initially thought in the calf area, and then they did some further evaluation more in the fibula region. So practice today fully, and the expectation is, again, he will start. It doesn't even sound like they'll bring up Brett Rippon, their third quarterback right now, off the practice squad. Sometimes you see that for kind of insurance purposes, but it sounds like Daniel Jones good to go, and Riley Leonard will continue to be the backup.
By the way, I'm going to show my ignorance here. Fibula. Now, is that the shin? Do we know?
Yeah, that's kind of my general thought, right?
Is that the
I should probably
tibula?
bring up.
There's a femur.
Should I do
There's-
the operation?
Femur's the
Femur's
thigh.
way high up.
There's a humerus. Do we know where the humerus is? Is that the funny bone? That's the arm,
Femur's
right?
the biggest bone in the human body, right?
Which one, the humerus or the femur? You said
I
the
believe the femur is.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Let's stop at Target and buy the operation game. You can come over later and we can play it.
Yeah, for real, right? Eddie, can you look up for me the fibula, please? I believe fibula sounds like shin, right? He's got shin splints. Either way, though, good to go. Now, Kevin, the story to me of this game is this, and that is, I think there's kind of been a blueprint now in Pittsburgh, and I know Pittsburgh's got a very dangerous front four. I mean, we saw that. But the way that they just blitzed, and got after Daniel Jones and got him uncomfortable, and then all of a sudden you started to see that inability to hold on to the football of Jones that had plagued him in New York. Do you expect that Kansas City will go as aggressively as we've seen now Atlanta try to do and Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I mean, that would be my assumption. That's certainly Steve Spagnuolo's MO is to blitz. I actually think, probably more Pittsburgh than Atlanta, but, their numbers, maybe a little bit lower, especially Pittsburgh, again, from a blitz standpoint when you have T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith. But that's what Kansas City does. I mean, they blitz a ton. I don't think they have the edge rushers per se that, again, the two previous opponents are certainly Houston, who you'll see coming up a week from Sunday, displayed last night. But, yeah, I think right now, again, it fits who Steve Spagnuolo is as a defensive coordinator for Kansas City. And also, given what the Colts have shown the last couple games, that would be my guess.
Eddie, do you happen to have the breaking news sounder? And that breaking news, Eddie, is?
Isaiah Pacheco is out for Kansas City. So it's Kareem Hunt and Brashard Smith as the two backs once again for Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes.
But Kansas City, Kevin, has not really it's not been the typical Kansas City offense, right? I mean, Travis Kelce is leading them in receiving. That is nothing new. But in terms of running the football, this is an area, is it not, where Kansas City has really yet to get any solid footing this year?
Yeah, I'm curious if that means Carson Steele will get called up from the practice squad at all with them needing another running back. But, yeah, it is something I think it's been a pretty big storyline in Kansas City this week of, Andy Reid kind of saying, hey, I probably should call a few more, like, actual runs and not, the RPO variety where you leave it up to what the defense does. So I do think that's a bit of a storyline for Sunday, especially without DeForest Buckner. Do opponents kind of view the Colts in a different light? Obviously, the Atlanta situation, it wasn't necessarily known until later in the week that he was going to be out, and Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier still had plenty of run game success. So I do think that is something to keep an eye out for coming up on Sunday from Kansas City side of it.
Now, we were just talking also, Shane Steichen saying that he's optimistic that DeForest Buckner will play this year. And I'll tell you what I take from that, Kevin, and you tell me if I'm being too cynical here. By Shane Steichen coming out and saying, look, I'm confident that he will play this year, that immediately to me jumps out as, yeah, but I didn't know that was in question, which means that this is more severe than just – even though you're talking about the neck, I get it, right? But if I'm not mistaken, it was a 4-game IR, right?
Yeah, so he has to miss, already missed Atlanta. He has to miss, obviously, Sunday. Next week, Houston. The week after that, Jacksonville. And then he could be back. I want to say there's 4 regular season games after that. So the earliest he could return is Seattle in mid-December. But that's definitely a different Steichen than what we heard earlier in the week. It was kind of hopeful. And now it's, I'm very optimistic. So, I assume that means, whatever, the strength numbers they're seeing behind the scenes, just how he's overall feeling, the stem cell treatment for whatever, the stinger issue or nerve issue, whatever it was down there in Panama, clearly has left at least a good first impression. And we'll see how, December and maybe even January plays out for his return.
Kevin, in your opinion, the second half of the schedule now, and, let's begin with this. I mean, obviously we knew Kansas City and how big this is, right? And I get it. But if you look beyond that, just based on last night, do things get a little more real here? Like, do we all of a sudden need to kind of keep a left eye on Houston?
I would say left eye and probably right eye, given how their pass rush looks. I think, if you just play it out, if Vegas is right and the Colts lose on Sunday, you are now 2 games up on Houston, and then you still have 2 games left to play them. If Houston were to win both of those games, they would have the same record in the tiebreaker with you. If you split, obviously you'd still have that 2-game lead, and obviously if the Colts swept them, you would you'd be in great shape. So yes, I do think that is something that is worth keeping an eye on. I mean, how many teams go through a backup quarterback starts 3 games and they win all 3 of them? And that's what they just did with Davis Mills. So sounds like C.J. Stroud is back. Now again, they are a game behind Jacksonville. Jacksonville is 1 game closer to Indy, and again, both of those matchups have yet to be played. So, yeah, it's kind of a weird scheduling year for the AFC South for the Colts. They're 8-2. In a normal AFC South year, you would be have a massive lead in the division, but because you have yet to face the second-place team, Jacksonville, 2 games behind you, and the third-place team, Houston, currently 2.5 games behind you, there still is, a little bit of wiggle room. So, as long as the Colts take care of business in the AFC South, they are fine. But, obviously we've seen, massive December games in this division in January in recent years, and more often than not, they haven't gone the Colts' way. So they'll have to change that tune if they don't want to sweat it out, Week 17 and Week 18.
By the way, congratulations, because I think this is the first time that we've had you on, or that I've had a chance to talk to you since the birth of your 3rd child, right, Nellie?
Correct. Yes. Thank you. I appreciate that. Nellie is 2 weeks old, so I will let her know when I get home that Uncle Jake gives her.
That's
her
right.
best.
Now, here's the thing, Kevin. You're the second of 2. Is that correct? It's just you and an older brother?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. Ryan is 5 years older than me. Yep.
Okay, so I'm the 3rd of 3, okay? My parents were completely checked out. Like, by the time I got to high school, it was awesome. I mean, it was just me. Both my sisters were out of the house. They were away at college and then out of college, respectively. And, literally, it was like, did you burn the house down today? No? All right, cool. And it was great. Now, do you notice, is it too early to know this, obviously, but I am curious. The first 2 weeks, if you will, just the overall nature of bringing a baby home and et cetera, is there a different approach or a different, feeling of comfort the 3rd time around versus, say, when Rosie, who was your first, came home?
Well, I must say I had forgotten that you were the 3rd of 3. I think had I jogged my brain with that, I might have rethunk some actions, around a year ago or so. But not to go down that path. But, yeah, that is a great question. I would say yes. I would say, when you have the first, particularly because Rosie was born in COVID, I felt like, every minute it was like, oh, my gosh, is she breathing? Should we call the doctor? Is that normal? Can you Google that? Will you text your nurse sister? That's primarily how things went, whereas with this one, it's like, oh, wow, Max's dinosaur didn't leave a mark on her. I guess she's fine. It's just like there's a little bit more of light at the end of the tunnel. Things are a little bit more reassured of okay, just because she hasn't, pooped in 5 hours or, she maybe is having a little bit of a nasally episode here, she probably is okay. So, yes, certainly some reassurance in the wee hours in the morning.
What about from a sleep standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, it's just as, bad as it was through the first 2. You just see hours of the night where I'm like, gosh, what outside of Jake Query, who is up at this hour? I'm like, I mean, like
Yeah.
3:08 a.m. I'm like, rocking her, looking outside. I'm like, oh, no cars have passed my house in the last 3 minutes. Well, yeah, because no one in their right mind would be awake. So, yeah, that is probably the one thing. It's like, oh man, it is quite the reminder that sleep is important to you.
Kevin Bowen, our
But
guest.
that's why you have
here.
Java House, right?
What's that?
But that's why you have Java House, to get you through the day.
Kevin, thank you. As a matter of fact, if you'd like to use Jake25, you can get 25% off your order at javahouse.com. Kevin Bowen, our guest, you hear him on the Fan Morning Show. Huh?
I meant to let you know, and I guess I probably should have asked him before I reveal this, but I believe my brother-in-law is taking a job with the great Java House here upcoming in a few weeks. So shout out to Java House for that.
Now, is this wasn't one of your brother-in-laws who I met at the gym?
Yeah, this was him, I think. Yeah, he was intimidated to say hi to you.
He was cool. He's a 500 fan, if I'm not mistaken, right? He was an IndyCar fan.
Big 500 fan, yeah. And he is a Jake Query fan as well. But, yeah, he was a little intimidated. I don't know what your presence is around the old, weights, but he was a little intimidated by you.
Yeah, listen, I'm a nice guy. You know what I mean? Now I'm irritable, but I'm a nice guy. Kevin, let's get back to, again, the Colts and Chiefs coming up Sunday. Big one at Arrowhead, no question about it. I was asking this question earlier. If you look at the history of these two franchises, there really are, in the last 15 years or so, there is much significant matchup, 15, 20 years. I mean, you can go back 30 if you want to go back to 95. There are a lot of big games between these two franchises, but the Colts have kind of owned it. And so as a result of that, it feels to me like this is not a franchise that there's a lot of angst from the Colts standpoint in terms of the Colts fan base. If you were to survey 1,000 Colts fans and say, who is your second most hated team behind New England? Who do you think gets the most votes? Who is the second biggest rival to a Colts fan?
Well, that's a great question. Obviously there's some disdain, I think, towards Pittsburgh for Nick Harper, Aaron Bailey, et cetera, et cetera. The Chargers there for a while.
Yeah.
They were kind of, Phillip Rivers was kind of hated, I feel like, just because, if he's not on your team, you just think he's just kind of a crazy, whiny dude at times. But, then he's on your team and you realize he's just crazy passionate about the game of football. I don't know if any of the AFC South teams qualify. I mean, I guess maybe because you haven't won in Jacksonville in forever, and you go back to Eddie George running all over you in the playoff game, maybe a little bit of Tennessee. But that is a good question. I still think Pittsburgh, just like the magnitude of those games, the AFC title game in '95, and then a lot of people view that Colts team that lost to them in '05 as probably the best of the Manning era. So, yeah. I would say, yeah.
I'll tell you what's funny. Pittsburgh is to Indianapolis what Indianapolis is to Kansas City, right? I mean, if you're a Chiefs fan, you probably have a disdain for the Colts because that team, and I know I'm going way back here, but the letter-rip Colts that went in and beat, that was a number one seeded Chiefs team that was the best team they'd had in quite some time, and the Colts go in there and knock them off. And then obviously the no punt game, the Colts get that. The Super Bowl run where Larry Johnson was expected to go for 350 yards and the Colts corral him and they win that game. I mean, the Colts have kind of owned it, right?
Well, yeah, and obviously the huge comeback in the
Superman game, right?
Yeah, the Superman game there in 2013. And weirdly, Mahomes hasn't beaten him in the regular season. That's just kind of an oddity that they're the only team that Mahomes has yet to beat in the regular season here. And, one of those games was in Arrowhead. Now, granted, Mahomes and the Chiefs did beat the Colts in the playoffs with Andrew Luck. Actually, Andrew Luck's final game is what it ended up being there in that 2018 season. So, yeah, it does feel like the Colts and the Chiefs have had some crossover, particularly in the postseason, a little bit more here. I remember Bruce Arians won a huge game there late in that 2012 season to clinch with Chuck Pagano came back. So you do have probably a little bit more than you typically do with some divisional teams. Yeah, Larry Johnson, as you pointed out, going to that Super Bowl run, how many questions the Colts had with their run defense before facing Larry Johnson that opening round game, and they were outstanding against the league's leading rusher.
Finally, Kevin, before we let you go, so Mooney Ward, we're talking in there, right? Shavarius Ward?
Yeah, good to go. Good to go. Has clear concussion protocol. Sounded like the symptoms were very extreme, though. I think probably most people would have expected that, given, he got knocked out and was, on IR for a month. But, yeah, we just spoke with him. That's why I was a few minutes late hopping on, so I apologize. But he said that, comparing his two concussions, he had one earlier in the year. He called it more migraine than he called this one a concussion that honestly had him rethinking if he'd ever play football again. Said he was busy for about a month. He was puking and really didn't start feeling good until the bye week. So
man, that's scary, though.
Sounds like Yeah, listening to him share these details, it was scary. It was, and again, listening to hear him compare the two concussions, I guess the old snowflake analogy of, all concussions aren't the same, very, very apparent here. And, he just said when Ogletree hit him, he just blacked out and really doesn't remember much of it at all. And it sounded like just awful for those that have not totally followed the Mooney Ward story. He also lost his daughter. The definition of beyond tragic a year ago this week. So that has been something that's weighed on him, and he just expressed to us right now mentally, he's just dealing with a lot. So, he did reiterate that football-wise, he feels like he's in, a great spot to go out and play on Sunday and all of that. But, yeah, it was probably just a reminder of sometimes these guys, are dealing with a lot more than, what might be let on.
And how would you assess Sauce Gardner?
Yeah, I thought he played fairly well in Germany, considering the circumstances. I know Drake London, who got him that 2-point conversion where he slipped. He had the near pick, but I think the luxury with having these two guys now, somewhat up to speed is, sure, you could pick to shadow them, but also you don't have to do the, hey, you follow this guy around, you follow that guy around. If you wanted to, you could leave them both on the same side of the field. Whereas, I think, in Germany, for example, Atlanta sometimes moved Drake London around, and that proved to be, something that worked out quite well for him. Whereas I don't think that's necessarily a must for the Colts, given they feel very good about their corner group. And honestly, it's probably the best secondary that I've seen the Colts roll out in a game, honestly, in the history that I've covered the Colts.
Kevin Bowen, of course, you will hear him coming up 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday, the Fan Morning Show, along with James Boyd and Jeff Rickard. We'll have all of the coverage as well, including his recap of the game against Kansas City, brought to you by the Indiana Donor Network on social media, as well as 1075thefan.com, where you can read his coverage of the Colts. Appreciate it, Kevin.
Have a great weekend, guys.
All right, Kevin Bowen joining us on the program. We come back. It is a Friday. It is the bottom of the 2 o'clock hour. You know what that means. It means it is a Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday, including an update on something happening for next year. So look forward to bringing you that. Also, another fabulous mention for favorite song of all time. So Anthony brought one up, and I'm like, how in the world did I miss this one? Because it probably has been played inside the car of Jake Quarry as much as any song out there. But we can't play it on the radio is the problem. I'll let you know what that is, too. It is a Friday. It is the 2 o'clock hour. You know what that means. It means it is, in fact, time for the Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday, where each and every Friday I tell you a different story that has to do with the world of sports and a feel-good story, and there are plenty of them out there. As a matter of fact, last week I was telling you about a young lady that came back from a knee injury, helped her team win a state title in volleyball. And there is no specific story in terms of that this week other than to say this. I was just talking to Franciscan Health yesterday, and we were talking about next year and, you know, the 26th season and continuing to do these stories, which I so much enjoy. And we've talked about different student athletes that have overcome, whether it be something psychologically, something from a health standpoint, or just somebody that overcomes odds to put themselves or their team in position to succeed. Also about teams that have overcome such obstacles and getting to where they want to go. And one of the things that I was unaware of, and I appreciated them bringing this up as we were talking about it yesterday, you know, Monday I'm going to be at Parks Place up in Fishers. And yes, we'll be recapping the Colts and the Kansas City Chiefs, but we'll be talking as well about the professional volleyball draft for the Indy Ignite. And earlier in the show, when I was talking about Monday's show, I mentioned that one of the things that I loved about the Indy Ignite a year ago when I first kind of was introduced to, and of course anybody was because they were a new team, their inaugural season was last year, but to be able to go and see the enthusiasm, the passion, and then, you know, a point of aspiration for young girls playing sports in Central Indiana and the passion for volleyball within Indiana, and for those young girls to now have role models, professional athletes to look up to. And so much of the last probably 15 to 20 years in sport has gone into incorporating and involving girls and women in sports. Obviously, the Fever and Caitlin Clark and having Stephanie White on each week. You know, to me, it's very important that anybody listening to this show, two things that I've always tried to do. Number one is to present as much balance in terms of the teams of the area as possible. So to not show favoritism towards an Indiana or against a Purdue or for a Butler or against a Ball State or whatever it might be. And the other is, I think a lot about, and I'm not saying that I always adhere to this. Like, for example, when I was asking about people's favorite songs and somebody mentioned Scarface by the Ghetto Boys, and I'm like, that is absolutely one of my 3 favorites of all time. It's a fabulous song. Can't play it on the radio for the obvious reasons, right? And I go back to thinking about when I was a kid in the car with my parents, listening to the radio or watching television with them. And I have tried, and I'm not saying that I've always adhered to this, but for the most part, I've tried to have a clear thought in my mind of trying to do a radio show that if you are in the car with kids or with your family, that everybody can equally enjoy, and that there's no walking on eggshells of things that I might say or innuendos or language or other such things. And with that, the coverage of sport, I've tried to more involve sport outside of my level of understanding or mainstream growing up. And in talking about heart disease, talking about heart health, getting people prepared for the $49 heart scan from Franciscan Health, which you can do, you know, number one in Indiana for interventional coronary care is Franciscan Health. Health Grades has it number one by Care Checks in terms of cardiovascular care. And the heart scan is an easy way to get yourself an idea of where things stand for your heart health. $49, non-invasive, easy to do, and you get a heart health risk assessment with it. But I think that the innuendo or the thought has been, as I have done this campaign, and I have been so grateful to Franciscan Health for allowing me the platform and the backing with the platform that I have to deliver a message that is very important to me about heart health. Because as I've mentioned a million times, I realize, but when I survived a heart attack, I didn't really know why I survived. And there is a guilt, truthfully. There's a guilt that comes with it, a survivor guilt, that hung over me for a while there, because all I could think about was the number of people that did not survive the heart attack that I did. And then you wonder, like, well, I mean, my life is no more valuable than theirs. How did this come to be? And I thought, well, at the very least now I have a responsibility. And the point I'm making is, I guess I didn't really realize or stop to think that heart disease is a leading cause of death for women as well as men. And I think that when we think about, especially on a sports talk radio show, the importance, the significance of addressing heart health, the narrative would come across, or it would go through the lens to a lot of people of me talking to men. Because when you think about heart attacks, a lot of times you think stereotypically, the widow maker, right? Not the widower maker, the widow maker, which is what I had. And you think of heart attacks as being kind of a thing, a guy thing. And yet heart health is equally important to women. The challenge for women, and guys, if you're listening, I'm speaking to you just in terms of being able to relate to or be conscientious and aware of the women in your life, whether it be your mom, your wife, your daughter, whoever it might be. And women, if you're listening to me, to be aware of this as well. The symptoms of heart issue with a woman is different than a man in terms of the things that you feel. And they're a little more subtle, and that's the real danger when it comes to women. And I'm talking about, it's more just like a fatigue, a feeling of soreness in the jaw or in the neck. Those can be things that can be related to the heart. And so what we're going to do upcoming here in 2026, which I look forward to, is along with the feel-good stories in sports, I'm going to make sure that I'm more conscientious of and making it a couple of times a month something that is centered around women in sports and young girls in sports, because I want to make sure that we are also addressing the message of heart health, heart awareness, and making sure that you're conscientious, getting the heart scan for Franciscan from the women's standpoint as well as the men's standpoint. There are so many aspects of women's health, breast cancer awareness, obviously, menopause. I mean, there are areas of women's health that are within the mainstream, and I don't know that heart is with it. So I look forward to upcoming in the year sharing stories with you, not just about feel-good stories for the heart in sports, but also those that relate to women, as we do what we can over the next year with a very concerted effort to make sure that women are equally involved with the heart health awareness that we do each and every week from Franciscan. And that's going to be a concerted effort that we're going to tag team with Franciscan upcoming in 2026. But again, I want to remind you, number one heart program in Indiana for cardiology by Healthgrades, number one in Indiana for interventional coronary care. I'm talking about Franciscan Health, and the $49 heart scan is available. You can pay out of pocket, self-refer, franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles, or you can always call 833-238-0688. I don't expect you to remember 833-238-0688. So at the very least, simply Google Franciscan Health Heart Scan. It is so easy, takes about 15 minutes, non-invasive, and it is the start to a healthy heart. All right, we'll come back. We'll get back into the Colts and Chiefs and why it's an even bigger one today than it might have been this time yesterday. We'll explain that next. By the way, I probably should have done this earlier. As somebody who has spent a fair amount of time in Kansas City, if you are going to Kansas City, and we'll join JMV here in just a minute as part of the crossover. I know he has a less than favorable, memorable experience in Kansas City of pushing buses out of snow during his time there. But if you are going to Kansas City for the game, the best thing that I can say is the stadium itself is on the Missouri side of Kansas City, just before you get to downtown. So downtown Kansas City kind of straddles between Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. And Arrowhead Stadium and Royal Stadium, Kauffman Stadium, are in the Truman Sports Complex, which is just about 2 miles to the east of downtown. So before you get into downtown, if you're coming from Indy, is where you hit the stadiums. But the Missouri side of just past the downtown area, just south of the downtown, there's an area called the Plaza. And the Plaza is essentially like kind of a Meridian Kessler type area of Kansas City, but it is outdoor dining, outside shopping. It is a really, really good place to do holiday shopping and enjoy dinner. Barbecue places all over the place in Kansas City. Kansas City is a super cool town. The only problem with living in Kansas City would be you are literally like 6 hours from anything. But it's basically Indianapolis, just a little bit further west. A lot of heritage there. The stockyards are just south of Kemper Arena. Cool stuff to see in downtown Kansas City. And then you're about 40 minutes from Lawrence if you wanted to go check out the University of Kansas. But it is cool. And we'll get more into our game predictions in terms of what happens. But let's see what JMV's got cooking in terms of his show. We will check in with him in just a minute. As part of the crossover, brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com, 317-353-2141 is the telephone number. District Tap up on the north side is where John is located. And JMV, I'm assuming that when you watch the Colts and Chiefs, the first thing you're going to think of is you and Drew Storen and other guys pushing buses out of snow, right?
Yeah, that was a blast there. That was a great time. I absolutely hate that hellhole. I do. I'll be honest with you, though, Jake, and you and I are cut from the same cloth on this. What I remember the most about these Colts-Chiefs matchups was Lynn Elliott and that playoff game in Kansas City. That will always stand out because that was the first at all pulse of any significant level of winning. I think that's when we first understood what it really meant to be in terms of winning in the NFL with that kind of Haley's Comet of an in-season playoff run going back in the season of 1995. That stands out to me more than anything else.
Well, you know what's funny about that run? And yes, I totally agree with you because that, and I don't know that you know, for people that were not around then in 1995, John, that Colts run against Kansas City kind of felt like the Pacers of last year in the fact that it was like all of a sudden it just all came together where you're like, holy cow, these guys actually can win this thing. You know what I mean? Because what you saw, that Colts team, like last year's Pacers team, was one that it wasn't until the end of the year when they were totally healthy and everything came together, which is ironic because Marshall Faulk was hurt and Lamont Warren and Zach Crockett kind of had to split the running back duties. But by the time you realized what you were seeing, they had already arrived, if that makes sense, right? And that win, nobody gave them a chance to win that game in Kansas City, and Lynn Elliott missing that kick, it was unbelievable.
No, it was. That's what really stands out to me in this. I don't know what interests you more, to see with the whole limited participation thing what Daniel Jones looks like, to see if during the bye week they got a solution to the offensive line, the lack of protection, the quarterback ball security, or, you know, to see about the secondary that has been put together, that high power, high dollar, high profile secondary, or is it Kansas City at 5-5? Because this is kind of like their last gasp right here. I mean, seriously, it's like that opening scene in Jaws where the girl's naked and skinny dipping and swimming, and, you know, you're kind of going down for the last time right here this season if you're Kansas City. A little bit.
You're right. And here's the other thing.
I like how you were just talking about we keep this kid-friendly, Jake, and then we're talking about that.
Oh, skinny dipping in Jaws?
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
You don't even see any nudity there, Eddie. All right.
Jaws ruined it all, right?
I I get rated R after 3 o'clock.
That's
okay?
right.
So, yes.
I think the thing that is going to be the story of this game, in all honesty, is simply which team gets to the other team's quarterback. And I don't even necessarily mean making contact with them as much as just keeping them uncomfortable. And, the Colts have had a problem. The problem with Mahomes, as I talked about earlier, John, is he almost thrives in that chaos, right, of a pocket collapsing where he's got to move around and extend plays and just hang in and hang in and hang in. Getting to him is a challenge. But if Kansas City's able to get to Daniel Jones, that's going to be the story, right? I mean, you can bet they're going to blitz, right?
And they don't. And they don't get to the quarterback consistently. I mean, that's the thing. They kind of argue about how they don't get to the quarterback consistently, like we argue about how this defense does not get to the quarterback consistently. So that's where I think we're really going to find there's another reference to the sea right here, a hole in the boat. A leak in the boat, if you will, if all of a sudden that offensive line gives up what they've given up in the past 2 games against Kansas City, a team that doesn't do it, Spagnuolo or not. That is definitely with the Texans coming up next week after watching them play last night. Houston, we have a problem.
By the way, speaking of that game back in 95, John, 96 technically, but the 95 season, I'm looking right here. I looked this up out of curiosity. I'm looking right here at Kansas City, Missouri weather history, and it claims, now you tell me if this is the biggest load of malarkey that you've ever heard. This website claims that the temperature was 49 degrees that day.
There's zero way, like 49 degrees below zero. Correct. It might have been.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like that the story of that game was the fact that it literally was, I mean, it was sub-zero, wasn't it? Or close to, very close to?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's why everybody kind of, including Len Elliott, blamed his lack of accuracy with field goal making on, kicking basically a concrete block.
Yes.
Because the ball was like a concrete block out there. Hey, have you guys been playing Kansas City music, like on the re-entries at all?
No, we were playing the song Kansas City there was the only thing that we've played today.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. Yeah, what are famous Kansas City bands? Do we have anything?
Boy, that's
Is there anybody?
Good question. I mean,
because I think we know it's like anybody that's ever made it big out of Kansas City. I mean, we have to hear from them every single moment, don't we? Like Sudeikis and Paul Rudd. If you ever made a movie and you're from Kansas City, we got to hear from you every second.
Let's see.
What's that other guy?
Here's
what's the other guy?
Your all-time favorite, John. Your all-time favorite. It looks like it's from Kansas City.
I know what you're going to say. Puddle of Mud.
Puddle of Mud, yes.
Yeah.
That's your guy,
yeah.
isn't it? Didn't you have a run with
the jackass? I'm the jackass. Yeah. He's going to get his ass whipped one night. That's for sure.
I can't remember. What was the story with him? I can't remember.
Oh, I think he rolled up on a significant other and in Kokomo. And then, to make the story even better, he goes to the Kokomo Red Lobster and wants to drink after the show. And this was actually from a waitress that called my show that worked there. And he wanted to drink, and he didn't have any ID. So he got his phone out and tried to sell them his ID on his Wikipedia page. Is that not just complete douchebag, drunken, stupid idiot?
That is awesome. The Rainmakers, by the way, had some success, right? 80s and 90s, they're Kansas City.
Kansas, yeah. And Rob, what's the other guy? The other comedian actor that's in all the Apatow stuff. Rob Riggle. No, Rob Riggle from Kansas City.
Rob Riggle, yes. He was obviously one of the cops in The Hangover, right? Another Kansas City guy. Tech 9, Kansas City.
Not you, Fat Jesus. That was a great line. Not you, Fat Jesus.
That's him. Yeah. Come on up here, little man. All right, John will be at District Tap coming up 3 o'clock. Yeah. We'll throw it out to you in about 8 minutes, John. Look forward to it.
You got it, pal.
All right, Eddie, your thoughts on and your prediction. I keep going back and forth on this.
I've been on the Colts this entire week thinking about it just because I think when you think about playoff games, and this is going to be like a pseudo playoff game for the Indianapolis Colts, you have to be able to run the football, and you have to be able to stop the run. Those are two questions that I have about Kansas City, and at the end of the day, they may have the better quarterback between Patrick Mahomes and Daniel Jones, but I just think the fact that the Colts are going to be able to run the ball against Kansas City doesn't run it at all, so it makes them extremely one-dimensional. I think that gives the Colts an added layer in their favor, on top of coming off the bye to have an extra week to prepare. So I've got Colts winning 27-24.
Boy, you almost stole my exact score. However, I've gone back and forth on this, and I know that the Colts have owned Kansas City, and I know that they've never beaten, Mahomes has never beaten the Colts in a regular season game.
He's never lost 3 in a row in his career either.
I just think their back's against the wall, and it's dangerous. And if it were here, that'd be one thing. And I've picked the Colts almost all year long. I think maybe I picked the Chargers against them. I can't remember. But I'm going to go with Kansas City. I'll say 27-23, Kansas City wins. But either way, Monday at noon, we'll be talking about it, and I'm going to be up at Parks Place in Fishers Monday. Not often that we're on the road. I would love to see you folks there. I'm begging you, if you're in the area, to come by and see us, say hi. If you wear anything from the Indy Ignite, you're going to get your lunch taken care of. So we would love to see you from noon until 3 on Monday. John's up next. I thank you for listening to Query & Company.